Hi, good evening, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome to the first SCREE Special Committee on Racial Equity Committee meeting of 2023. Hope you all had wonderful holidays and a good new year. Welcome to SCREE committee members Bob Bender and Camelia Tepelis. Since we're a small group, Marianne, did you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, been getting the information from the community boards for a while, but I'm actually especially interested in racial equity. And I'm actually I had a small group of people from the Bronx, both in Riverdale and other areas, who were sort of coming together, interfaith and also community groups, and we're working on some anti-racism issues. And this came about well, it was in response to some of the issues that arose in terms of racial justice, and why the Twin Parks fire happened back almost a year ago now. So this group is trying to work with issues of racial equity and racial justice in the Bronx. And we kind of had got one project done, but we're trying to sort of figure out where to go next. And so I thought I'd just see what's going on here.
Great.
So
that's wonderful to hear. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We have a bit of an agenda, but then we'd love to hear a little bit more from you.
I was really just here to learn about what's going on and stuff, so.
Great. And
if we might hook in somewhere.
Okay. Yeah. All right, so let's get started. Cesar, welcome. We're just going to get started with our agenda. We did have a couple of items that I just wanted to check up on. One, Julie Reyes indicated that she would be here tonight. I have not heard from Bob Fanuzzi yet. So I know that we're running low on members. So that would be something that I'd like to talk about tonight as well. But first things first, Bob, thank you so much for your edits on the work or the interim draft, the 2022 interim draft of the SCREE report. Camelia or Bob, did you have any further comments that you want to make on it, or any other additional action items?
For me, oh, sorry, go ahead, Bob. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Camelia. Yeah, I think we need to emphasize somewhere, and I haven't quite figured out where yet, the budget process and how what we do should correspond to the capital and expense budget requests, which is really the way in which the community board expresses the needs in the community board district. And I wish I'd had a little more time to go over all of this, but somewhere in there, I think we need to highlight more, even more than we do, how through the committee process and through the budget requests, we identify issues of equity that we urge all the committee chairs to consider when they're submitting their capital and expense budget requests. As you may know, we're embarking on that process again right now. David Gelman brought it up last night at the executive committee meeting, and I'm sure will come up again next week at the full board meeting. So I think that's something that needs a little more attention than the executive summary of the interim report than it gets at the present time.
Is that something that you want sort of a brief summary from David Gelman on, just like what the process is?
No, I don't want to get into details about the process. I think, because the report is really going to the community board, to board members, I think primarily, I think we can assume that they're familiar with the budget process, and what we really want to do is emphasize again the significance of taking into consideration equity issues as we draw up our budget requests. So having said that, and having said that I haven't yet found exactly the right place to do it, I guess I'm volunteering to identify the right place to do it, and I'm willing to do that.
Okay. And I know that we had listed it as an interim report with the summary from the chair, but I also think that it's better if we leave it from the committee. I don't really think it's necessary to come from the chair. So unless someone has a strong reason why we should continue that, I'd be happy to leave it as just a report from the, each fiscal year's committee.
It's fine with me if nobody objects.
Not an objection, I think, but I do feel Margaret, that it would be nice to list each fiscal year who was in the committee, just to simply give people that worked the credit of them working on this, because it's been 3 years now. So the composition changed a little bit. So I think that'd be
it's
nice.
at the end of the executive summary each year who served on the committee.
Sorry, I just scrolled yesterday very quickly through things, and sorry, Bob, were you done? Can I add something?
No, I was done, and I was just going to say what Margaret just said, that it is at the end of the summary. But yes, I'm finished with what I said earlier, Camelia.
Thank you. Yeah, Margaret, just wanted to add, again, I scrolled through and I landed on the end part where there are a lot of sort of descriptions, what the community board does, blah, 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 city charter. And just to note, I think last time we spoke about this may have been October or November. Anyways, it was before the latest revision of the city charter that was voted on, revision that adds a preamble to the city charter stating the values of the city of New York, notably that we live in a, I mean the amendment, remember we had even a speaker that we had on probably in September or October, so before telling us about the values that the city will sort of formally adopt by vote of the population, specifically that fact that we live in a multiracial society with equity and justice for all. I think the fact that the city is stopping its tracks to ask people to vote on this is very relevant. It's not shown now in the report, and I think that appendix should be rewritten to highlight this, in addition to what it says now. Also, I think there is a further matter that is a little bit more sensitive, but it's also related to the city charter, the previous amendment of the city charter of limitation in the duration of mandates of community board members. This is a matter that came up a couple of times in recent meetings in LRE, in exec, in full board. I don't want to personalize, but I think this is something that should also be reflected. I even drafted a resolution for full board that was discussed, which quoted from the report of the City Charter Commission on the importance of having community boards energy being replenished on a 8-year sort of basis. And I think that our community board also has this issue that sort of affected us in the sense that sometimes this, the lack of limitation of terms prevented maybe some newer energies and a better coordination with the demographics of our district. And I think we're still struggling even now, and we do have a part in the report, at that table that shows distribution of from the borough president's office, of community board members and kind of their self-declared ethnic affiliation. And we do have discrepancies there to deal with in terms of the Latino population. All this to say that these two city charters should somehow be reflected in the report. So I
But
think
is
I
the
will have a
city-
closer look for maybe for
Is
next
the
session.
city editing the charter though? I don't want to
The
create
city
new
approved
language.
the edited. No. What I'm saying is we should point out to the fact that the city did edit the charter.
Yeah,
by
so I think
vote.
that's a good point for the interim, because we're in the next fiscal year. So we're doing
Right.
things, right, every fiscal year. And for the
Right.
interim report that will be due in May or in June,
Correct. Yeah,
that
that's
will
what I'm saying.
include that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what
So
I'm saying is
this is just the edits of the FY
of the
22.
previous. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was
But
talking
that's a
about
good
the next
point.
one.
No, I don't want to
Yeah,
lose
yeah.
your points because they're good ones.
Yeah. So I think I would. Yeah. I have further thoughts on this, but for now, let's keep it at this.
Okay, so let me just pause there really quickly because I think that's an important distinction. So for the FY22 interim report, Bob, you're going to give us a paragraph on explaining the budget process and, well, not explaining the budget process, but the emphasis of the budget process in equity issues. And we're going to add that to the executive summary is that for fiscal year 22 or for 23?
Well, the budget process is an annual process, so it applies this year, it will apply next year.
No, I get
So-
that, but the edit, I mean, I kind of wouldn't want to add it. I mean, it's just a perhaps arbitrary line that I'm drawing here, but since we've already submitted I wouldn't want to add something substantively like beyond the edits that we've made. That's my recommendation. You all can tell me if you feel differently, but for the FY23 process, it's still applicable, obviously, to any fiscal year. But since we've already submitted that report, do we want an interim report that has new content?
Well, this is something that I would suggest going forward. You know, I don't want to do this retrospectively, but going forward, yes, I do want to emphasize the significance of the budget process and the interaction with equity issues. And I'll send language to you, Margaret, which you can look over, and if you're satisfied with it, you can circulate it as you wish.
Okay, sounds good.
So I'm sorry, this is Julie. I don't know how to raise my hand on the phone. Hello, everybody. So this is moving forward, you're saying, Bob, for fiscal year 2023. We're not redoing something that's already been submitted.
Yeah, I think, Margaret, I think that's what you were saying, correct?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm proposing.
I mean,
Okay,
technically,
agree.
I believe, Julie, you've been doing this even longer than I have, but I
Yeah.
think technically we're actually in fiscal year 23 right now.
Right, so it'll be 24, you're right.
Yeah. Mhm.
Long day here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but the report we are referring to is for fiscal year 23, is not for 4. So we're preparing the report to capture the work that's been done, September through
That's right.
June effectively
That's
to
right.
reflect FY23.
Right.
So I think we
okay.
could definitely add that into the executive summary for FY23 that
Mhm.
we're going to submit in May.
Okay.
Okay. So those are great points. And in terms of the borough president, I know December was usually the time when they updated their demographic information from the previous fiscal year new community board members. So I will look at that and see if the borough president has released the updated data. And I'll, begin to add that into the report. Any other edits suggestions, last call on 22, FY 22. And then last call, any other suggestions, things that we want to keep as sort of like a running tally for FY 23.
Yeah, let's not call on 22. I mean, only if you want to, but if not 23, it's fine. Just moving of the we have like the demographics, which is the core of the matter. In the narrative section has 0 data, but all the data is in an appendix. I feel like those percentages are really important. So I feel like
All right,
a piece
Camelia,
of
this is
data,
your
but
time
if
to
not,
shine. This is your
no,
time to
but
shine. Any
all
big
these
movements you want to make
yeah, no,
before
but
May
listen,
of
no, you have a lot of,
2023?
I don't even know, Margaret, honestly, I'm respecting the fact that you're still cleaning the previous year. If I would have been you, I would have just dealt 23 straight
I have
fiscal
time.
20. So I'm just
So this
saying
is
that,
your time. You have the next
yes.
February, March, April. You have 3
Okay,
months
all I'm
to
saying
tinker
is that,
with it
yes, the
and to
pie
arrange
chart,
it as you see fit.
yes, pie
And then
chart
we will
should be in
discuss
the
it as a
main,
committee.
body, and that's it. But again, I think I've made my admiration clear to where we are with the past year. Thank you.
Okay, great. Julie, anything else you're going to mention?
No, can you hear me?
Okay. Yep.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thanks. Okay. I'm just taking notes. Okay. So, next thing's next. Bob Fanuzzi's not here to talk affordable housing. I have not heard back from Chuck, and I have not reached out to Stephen yet to talk about housing. I do think that there's some like parallel conversations that we want to have. Certainly, you know, they're sort of all not fitting together, but they're all for different standing committees. So we have affordable housing, we have cannabis, which sort of falls into economic development and maybe health and safety, you know, sort of like all those different kinds of things. We also have, in terms of economic development, I know it's not in our district, our community board district, it's in 7, but the conversations that are being held about the Kingsbridge Armory, which I think certainly has an influence on racial equity and some of the conversations that we're having about investments, because part of Kingsbridge Heights sits within CB8, it also sits in 7. But how are we having some of those conversations in CB8 to support and uplift conversations that, you know, the community, that the Armory, EDC, et cetera, are trying to bring about within the community and bring about greater engagement. So I guess there's a couple of different buckets where we probably need stronger outreach to our standing committees to see like what is going to be the engagement. And I just wanted to open that up and see what your thoughts are.
Margaret, the Land Use Committee has taken up the issue of affordable housing at both the October and December meetings. It didn't meet in November. I don't remember why. You know, as I've said more than once at board meetings, this is the #1 district need for Community Board 8. And actually, if you look at the district needs for community boards across the city, it's very often the #1 need, or it's very high on the list throughout the city. So, you know, we have started a discussion on it, which so far has been mostly informational, trying to explicate exactly what constitutes affordable housing, how the determinations are made for who is eligible for affordable housing, and so on. So, you know, we're still relatively early in this discussion, but it is taking place in the Land Use Committee, and I'm quite sure from conversations I've had with the chair of the committee that this is an issue that will continue to pop up on the agenda of that committee going forward. So, and this is not an issue that the board has really discussed in much detail in the past. So this is, I think, a good example of how the Racial Equity Committee is having some influence on some of the discussions taking place at some of the standing committees. I should add that the minutes of the October Land Use Committee, which did have a discussion of affordable housing, is up on the board website. The December minutes have not yet been posted, but there is you can read the October minutes to get a little more information about the discussion that took place back then.
So I guess the purpose of me bringing it up is that we set it out as a goal for this fiscal year. And in terms of housing and highlighting racial equity. So I guess, as we articulated some of our goals and really affordable housing and the emphasis of it, to your point, Bob, is being addressed at a standing committee, which is the most appropriate thing. Is there anything more that we want to do? Can we be supporting that conversation? I mean, Chuck, not that anyone needs to tell him anything, but is there anything more than we'd like to do in that space? And in the same vein, is there more that we want to support or uplift in terms of economic development related to cannabis, related to the armory, health and safety, et cetera, et cetera? What more do we want to do, and where do we want to be supportive? I guess articulating our goals in more of a defined way is basically what I'm searching for.
Yeah, I'm not, you raise a good question about the Armory. I mean, the Armory is literally across the street from Community Board 8, across Golden Avenue, and it certainly does impact Community Board 8. I would think that falls under the Economic Development Committee. And I know Nick is very, Nick Fazio, who's the chair of that committee, is very responsive, and his committee meetings are excellent. I do think that's an issue that really deserves a little more prominence on, in what we do in Community Board 8. And I think it's a matter of working with Nick, or going back to the board office and the board chair and saying, is that the right committee, or is there somewhere else where we should be talking about this? But I mean, for my 2 cents, I think economic development is the right place for that conversation to take place. And I agree with you, that is a major issue that really does affect our community, especially in the most in the least affluent part of our community, and so we really need to be on top of that issue and engaged with it.
Hey, Margaret.
Yeah.
Okay. In regards to the Armory, I know years ago when they started, I think Tony Casino was chair at the time, but this board did have some involvement with that group. I don't know if Tony did it as a representative of Community Board 8 or from a different organization, but I know that we were involved at one point in the beginning. So maybe we can be in touch with that community board to see if we can either have some involvement with the meetings, or at least know when it is, and maybe one of us attend the meeting to get some information and we can give input.
There's
or maybe,
well,
I don't know.
I did ask Laura about this 7 months ago, and she made it very clear that she wanted to keep a very clear line between community boards. So I kind of don't want to touch that again. Because we want to defer to 7 because it's in 7. But I did see that the community
8
board,
is right across the street.
Listen, you don't have to convince me.
I used to live there, 1 block away. I thought I was in
Yeah.
the wrong board when I came to 8.
Yeah, and Kingsbridge Heights, we're a community partner to those stakeholder efforts. And, we're in 8, but, it's involved in 7. There was just a community virtual workshop or meeting tonight. There's a in-person workshop on January 21st. So I will send all of that with the minutes from tonight's meeting so that folks have access to that. I did see that, like I was saying, that I did see CB8 sharing that information today about tonight's meeting, which was at 5. But other ways that we could be, sort of, I don't know, maybe it's just sharing information. I can circle back to Nick and Laura and see if anything has changed, but also they were very clear that it's CB7.
Margaret, the other thing to bear in mind is that I'm quite sure that the council member for the Armory is Councilmember Pierina Sanchez, who represents Kingsbridge and Kingsbridge Heights. I don't know about the state senator, but I would guess that it's Robert Jackson, who represents the eastern part of Community Board 8. So, that is another way to engage with that issue, which is through the elected officials who represent the Armory area, but also represent a significant part of the Community Board 8 district. So, that can be done, and there's nothing to stop you or me or anybody else on the board from participating, not necessarily as a representative of Community Board 8, but as a person with an interest who happens to be represented by the same representative who represents that area.
Yeah, for sure. And the council member facilitates those meetings oftentimes. Robert Jackson was just at this meeting tonight. He obviously just took over a few days ago. Senator Rivera previously was highly engaged, and he's now just across the street. But definitely they are very involved.
And Jackson comes to our meetings.
I'm sorry.
Jackson and his representatives comes to CD8's meeting quite frequently as well.
Okay, great.
Can I add something really quickly, Margaret, on this?
Yes.
Yeah, so just to recap a little bit, there is a strong push from the borough president on the Kingsbridge Armory sort of renovation project or revisioning, whatever. There was an in-person meeting in December with very heavy EDC involvement, EDC Economic Development Corporation that seems to have taken over the process of kind of putting forward the strategy, and they have a new website for the developments, kingsbridgetogether.com. There are 2, one online and one in-person meetings forthcoming. January 17 is the online, and January 21 is the in-person. What I do want to say is to indeed sort of support Laura in treading carefully around the boundaries issue. As you may remember, in the fall, there was a redistricting of New York City Council districts. And there was a proposal that was rejected for that area to fall under our council member Dinowitz's jurisdiction. It was rejected likely in relation to the history of the Kingsbridge Armory, which remained indeed the prerogative of our neighboring, not neighboring, actually she's part of the CBA too, our Councilwoman Pierina Sanchez. So I do believe that, how to say, again, I think you're correct, Margaret, in your instinct to observe, but not necessarily intervene sort of directly. But I do feel like this new website and the work that is forthcoming is very transparent from them. So I don't know, any yeah, whatever we can do in order to even just publicize these events, I think this would be a good a good thing. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, because definitely it's the same community. I'm switching now topic just to add something that came up last night, if I may. Last night in ENS, we had DEP making a super extensive presentation on the Jerome Park Reservoir. There is a heavy construction there, still focused on the technical aspects until 2026, but we had Gary Exenbel-Bank, of course, Karen Argenti, or many community members that were longtime advocates to public access to the reservoir. I mean, not to the reservoir as in the body of water, but to like a walk around, a pathway around the reservoir, same like Central Park has, strictly for like recreational purposes of the community. And I was looking now on the report, that entire area obviously is environmental justice area, and DEP at the moment, they are focusing on construction and they have zero plans of considering a future way for public access to the pathway around the reservoir. Again, the same way like, and Gary Exelban made a point that, you know, he worked like 40 years on this, on advocacy on this. Like you can cross Mario Cuomo Bridge, you can walk around the Central Park Reservoir, yet there are no plans for public access, you know, to the green space around the reservoir itself. So I don't know, I think from ENS, I mean, and I will give you probably like a little paragraph in the fiscal 23 report on this, just as a matter to, and from ENS, of course, we will further reach out to officials, etc., etc. But this is something about, because Julie Colon pointed out, like for many people in that community, and it's a community of 350,000 people, as according to Gary Exelbank, this is their only immediate access to water views. See what I'm saying? So it's not like here on like I'm in Spite and Diveville, I have two rivers, right? So it is and it's also because of the protection and like safety concerns, technical work, there is an actually natural green area all around the reservoir to which right now only the technical vehicles have access, right? So I think it's an important matter of public consideration. It's again a matter of public access that I think would be worth sort of flagging in the report. So just wanted to contribute that.
Absolutely. And as a personal request, I want all chain link fences out of parks, you know, along the Hudson. We're just going to start throwing things on. It's like, you know, all this beautiful space, but we can't be trusted not to just like make a beeline from the street right to the train tracks or something ridiculous. So good. I'm glad we're talking about this, because then my husband can stop listening to me carry on about it. So anyway, tangent. But yes, I agree with you. And that's something, it wasn't last year. I guess it was pre-pandemic that we had a bunch of conversations with DEP, and they basically had shot it down outright. You know, that they would not be allowing that space to be used as, you know, an open space where folks could walk around. But they also said that they would not open up the second part of the reservoir either. And that obviously changed. So
it changed last night. Yes, they offered 8 feet of water in both. So yes.
That's great. Okay, so I guess back to clarity on, I think we have, you know, at least two main standing committees that we want to be actively engaged with this year. One is land use and continuing to support and uplift conversations on affordable housing, cannabis, and the Armory, which are related to economic development, to the Economic Development Committee. And I guess the third committee I was thinking, I guess that just boils down to two committees. We could always be supporting, you know, conversations at the public safety and HHS committees, but those were my initial thoughts. And do we want to have any clarity other than just perhaps attending those meetings and reinforcing the conversation, or perhaps making recommendations on potential speakers? It seems like I'm just looking for some clarity on what we want to achieve or how we want to support those committees through our efforts.
Is anybody on this committee also
I-
on economic development?
No.
Okay. Well, then I can certainly talk to Nick Fazio, about the issues that we've raised tonight regarding that are appropriate for economic development. You know, and encourage him to you know, take on some of these issues. I mean, that will be up to him, of course, but I'll be glad to have that conversation with him.
And then well, they have a few groups within the Kingsbridge area that are working in regards to the armory. I can look online and see which groups for us to contact and maybe get some information and give input when needed.
Well, the public workshops are for that purpose. Like I
Okay.
mentioned, KHCC is a part of it. Northwest Bronx Clergy Community and Clergy Coalition is a part of it.
That's a big part of
Right.
it right now. is the
USA,
Northwest Bronx.
like there's a list of probably about 25 different organizations. So we can definitely share that. I think we have that information. Like I said, I'll share that as a part of the minutes of
Okay.
the follow-up from this meeting. And then just, I guess, like you all suggested, just for us to advocate that community board members attend those events and chime in just
Okay.
as a community member, not representing Community Board 8, but just to be sure that there's active engagement, because, you know, the Bronx is all of our homes. So, great.
Howdy. Hi, everybody. My name's
If
Cesar. I
there's-
just want,
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Cesar, go ahead.
yeah, I just want to add one other thing. I know earlier that the doctor told us about the website, and just want to add on that website there is a survey that anyone can fill out. That survey becomes very useful for gathering just more feedback for when people cannot attend meetings like the meeting at 5 o'clock, or just want to give feedback, and or if they are not available on the 21st from 12 to 4 o'clock, those surveys become very useful. So being able to also disseminate those surveys and fill it out, especially as someone that lives in, like, it becomes just very useful and instrumental of us getting our word out in ways. So being able to do that, being able to talk with RJ and Fiorina Sanchez, and being able to put pressure on multiple angles to get voices heard.
RJ being Robert Jackson. Okay.
Yes,
Great.
sorry.
Any other comments from the community on the Kingsbridge Armory or engaging in it, or any of the other recommendations that we have to work with standing committees of CB8?
Margaret, I think Marianne Montero had something to say about this before.
Oh, no, I was just saying that I thought that, as you mentioned, as you were saying, Northwest Bronx Clergy Community and Clergy Coalition is, I think that the Kingsbridge Armory, now that it's sort of back in, you know, it's been 40 years been going on, but now they're sort of back to square one. But I think that's a big chunk of what they're doing, you know. I've been to a few of their meetings.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so that's all. I mean, we sort of circled around this, but that's all I just wanted to say, nothing more, you know, but that was kind of said anyway. So, yeah, thank you though. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
So Sandra Lobo, the executive director of Northwest Bronx Community and Clergy Coalition, is the other co-chair alongside Councilwoman Fiorina Sanchez for the ECs and the Kingsbridge Armory community working group.
Thank you for that. Any last points on this? Okay. Two other things that I wanted to mention. One, Bob Fanuzzi had shared information on the EPA's environmental justice mapping, and he shared the link that was provided in the agenda. Camelia, is that something separate and apart from what you used in the mapping? And
Yes,
how
it's
is it
separate.
different?
Yes, this is the federal EPA interactive website, and I use the state environmental justice interactive website.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
I do not know
just-
if there is
Mhm.
overlap. I remember having a conversation maybe about a year and a half ago, actually, in ENS, telling them there are minor discrepancies in terms of the mapping, because it could be that New York State has their guidelines slightly different, but not my much, very slightly different than federal. So that's why I thought it was more important to use the state mapping tool and classification and definitions and numbers and percentages and everything. So yeah, but it's essentially the same thing. Yeah.
Okay. Is it worth looking any deeper, or you feel like
Yeah, I looked
it's
a little bit
essentially the
deeper the
same?
moment you send the email.
Okay.
Of course. But then
Okay.
I started looking, they do have, because, from the point of view of federal government, what they are monitoring is particular indicators, particulate matters, all kinds of gases. So there's chemical indicator, like scientific chemical indicators. So there are ways actually for you click and with a certain level of zoom and you select a filter to see which are the areas. So I started playing with that. State does not give that level of, because they don't need to monitor that level of detail. So I thought it was absolutely beautifully detailed, but frankly not directly relevant to us. And I clicked on a couple of times to see the zones, but overall we know what we know, right? Like that our area essentially west of Broadway, west of Broadway is in a much better shape than Broadway corridor and everything east, to simplify a little bit. But yeah, I'm sticking to the report in the format that it is with the data from New York State.
Okay. And I guess that's something for us to consider, whether we want to provide that EPA link as a secondary
As
resource.
a resource, absolutely, yeah. And I will keep playing with it just for me to, learn more, and I will report as we advance with the conversation.
Okay, great. I think that's about it. I know we're getting close on time. I did want to just raise some concerns that I have about the size of our committee. I mean, I think we are 4 strong tonight, but I do get concerned that perhaps we are missing a lot of different conversations and perspectives by our committee size, and perhaps representation. So I wanted to open that up and hear from you all on what your perspectives are.
I agree with you, Margaret. I think this committee could be larger, and frankly could be a little more diverse than it is. And I think we really ought to, at the board meeting next week, when you give your report, I think that's something to bring up, that we really would like additional board members to join the committee. There's nothing, I don't believe Laura's going to say, no, you can't add anybody else. I think if there are people who do want to join the committee, honestly want to join it, there's no reason why she would object to that. So I think urging more board members to join this committee is really a very worthwhile thing to do.
Okay, I will be sure to do that. Great. Any other thoughts, perspectives?
Margaret, are we going to talk about this Mayor's Office of Economic Development
Yes.
attachment
Sorry.
that you sent?
Yes, sorry, I blew right past that.
Oh,
Any
okay.
last comments on strategies to recruit additional board members, or thoughts on conversations and representation, et cetera? Okay, so then I did just want to address some of the opportunities that the mayor shared in a most recent email blast that came out through New York City's opportunities, the New York City work opportunities in the current administration. The mayor's office did highlight Mapping Equity, which is an online tool that provides the public with geographical picture of the quality of life in New York City. And I was just going to share my screen really quickly. We have reviewed this in the past, but I did want to emphasize that as an opportunity and remind folks that this exists. This is equitynyc.gov, and it has all sorts of awesome indicators. There are some base maps, city service metrics, how services are being done, and this sort of gets to some of the SCREE efforts, and maybe we want to dig into this a little bit more with our fiscal year 23 report, because we did want to talk about city service locations and how this might impact the service quality or access that Bronxites have, especially Bronxites in CB8 have to city services, and seeing how performance of city metrics is doing. So that's one thing I wanted to just remind all of us on. And I lost this. Sorry, stop share. I lost my document. I apologize for all the background noise. Sorry, I won't go, and I've lost my document, but there are two other points that I wanted to raise and just flag for folks. In addition to the agenda that we sent out, the community of equity practice is also something that the mayor's office wanted to emphasize through a recent executive order. And it requires city agencies to analyze key equity practices, like opportunities, hiring opportunities, how we are identifying disparities, and how we're creating additional opportunities within communities, how different city agencies are working to coordinate and provide resources, and certainly accountability across those various stakeholders. So all of this information is shared. I took a real quick snapshot from it. And obviously the cannabis industry employment, this is something that New York is trying to lead as a part of responsible cannabis, and focusing on communities that were penalized the most for cannabis use over the last several decades. So I did want to just share that with you, and I know we will be following up with standing committees, but I did want to flag that for everyone as a resource, and just to sign up for that newsletter as some of the mayor's priorities. Any other things that we wanted to talk about tonight? Any other any comments on that? Anything else that we wanted to raise?
Margaret, I just wanted to mention, I did not get into this in a lot of detail. The Working NYC document that you sent around before the meeting, but I looked at the mapping equity portion of that document, and there is so much information in there that I think really ought to be brought to the attention of at least 4 or 5 of our standing committees. You know, workforce supports, that's economic development, eviction prevention, that's housing, voting access, well, that's everybody. Fire safety, obviously, that's, you know, that's public safety, et cetera. You know, I would just suggest to you that when you give your report at the board meeting next week, you mention this document and mention how much information is in there and how this could really be a very valuable resource tool for the chairs of several of our committees, standing committees.
Absolutely. I definitely will. You know, and if Bob, Fanuzzi, and Camellia want to take a look at service report and data as a part of the FY23 interim report.
That's what I'm doing as we speak, Margaret.
Love it. Okay, I definitely will, and then we'll circle back to this on the FY23 report. Okay, any other things? I believe the November minutes, I have not seen the November minutes, so I will resend them. I don't think we're able to vote on them today. I don't know what happened to them, but I will send them as a part of these minutes, and I pledge to turn them around within 48 hours. But the November minutes are done, but I'm just not sure what happened to them. So let me follow up on that, and I'll see what happens. Anything else that we want to talk about today? Any other gaps that we haven't addressed yet? Okay, well, great. Thank you all for your time. Thank you for being here tonight. Happy New Year. Thanks for showing up. And I believe the next meeting will be held the first week of February, the first Thursday of February. I don't believe there's any restrictions or changes. So look forward to seeing you all then. Have a great night.
Thank you, Margaret. Happy New Year to everyone.
Bye. Happy New Year.
Thank you, Margaret. Happy New
Bye.
Year.
Thank you all. You too.
Take care.